theme, the second theme of our second session about macrofinance and financial exclusion, management of finance and banking under occupation. We invite Mr. Mahir Al-Marsi, the Vice President of the Board of Trustees of MAS, to moderate the session, and Mr. Habib Hen, who is a visiting researcher at MAS. He will present the discussion paper about this issue. We also welcome Dr. Heinar Fastbeck, Director of Globalization and Development Strategies at UNCTAD, former director, who will present his comment. We hope that this session will enrich discussion about financial inclusion under occupation and how it can be improved. Now we give the floor to Dr. Mahir Al-Masri to start the session. Thank you. Thank you very much. And greetings to you all. Raja wanted to sit next to me so that I don't feel lonely here. To respect the time, our question today is financial inclusion and the banking sector. So inclusion and exclusion under the current circumstances and in a near and midterm vision. I will not be speaking of the banking sector because I will say only general comments, because you all have a background about the role of the banking sector in Palestine and in any other country around the world. And it is a main pillar that is summarized in the deposits of the people. And out of these deposits, loans are dispersed for investment, trade, work in any country. The banking sector has been established since 30 years and grew on empirical and professional and international basis. It is a sector that is no doubt strong and solid, even under the current difficult circumstances. Palestine, in the past years, went through very difficult times that have naturally had an impact on the banking sector in terms of its performance, the deposits and savings it has, its fundings, and the situation or the financial situation of the authority was a main factor in the development of this sector, because the government and the Palestinian National Authority became a strong borrower from the banking sector. The banking sector contributed to development and growth in Palestine very effectively. In the past 10 years, the banking sector started with the Stock Market Exchange Authority and other financial institutions to implement a plan to raise awareness and financial education to have financial inclusion in Palestine. And this developed so that we can say that we have relatively good advancement. It still needs more development. The banking sector developed in using the new techniques and globalization and e-banking. And this had partial impact on helping our people in these difficult conditions. The paper that will be presented by Mr. Hen will delve into the details of the current situation. The banking sector,
is facing many restrictions from the
faces
Israeli
pressure from Israel. Israel does
government. They do
not
not retrieve their shekel currency on a
recover
regular
its
basis from the
shekel
Palestinian market,
regularly from
and
the
that honestly
Palestinian
is
market,
creating
and this
large
presents a lot of pressure on the
impact
bankings
on
and
the
their loans
Palestinian
to the
banks,
Palestinian
especially
private
to the
sector,
loans that they give to the
as they
Palestinians. Therefore,
have
their treasuries are full of
a
Israeli
lot of Israeli money
currency,
cash, and this
cash
cash
currency,
means that
and this means that this cash currency is
it
not
is taken out
given
of trades
to
in
the
the market.
market
That is the
for it to
financial
be
mass in
used. So
Palestine
therefore, the Palestinian capital
is
is
shrinking continually. The debt
facing an impact, and also the loans for the government and the debits they have is reducing the cash flow in the Palestinian economy, and that's also affecting it negatively. This is all has started prior to the war on Gaza, so we're talking about this for years, and this has escalated during the war on Gaza, whereas Gaza has an economic, quite a dynamic market. However, right now it's fully deteriorated, and even the savings of Gazans are saved. However, unfortunately, since the war, funding in Gaza has deteriorated, and due to the siege on Gaza and due to the financial and construction and industrial aspects all have been reduced to a bare minimum. The credit has been reduced in Gaza, and of course, now it's totally non operating. As you well know, the government, as His Excellency Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa has mentioned, the financial crisis, and they're getting loans from banks, and that is taking because this has definitely reduced lending to the private sector in Palestine. The Israeli aggressions have reduced, and therefore, in Gaza, it has deteriorated significantly.
In spite of the difficult circumstances facing the banking sector, it is still strong. We call it a sector that still complies with international standards with capital adequacy, and its assets are in a proper condition, and it is also complying with obligatory reserve and other allocations and provisions. The Palestinian banking sector has shown high responsibility and commitment, and it can preserve its financial solidarity. The monetary authority is an oversight authority and is very professional. It applies international standards on the banking sector in a very remarkable manner among all states. What about the future, the near future and midterm future? Banks, all of them, have taken reserves following their losses in Gaza. Every bank operating in Gaza has taken necessary precautions for the losses endured or expected in Gaza. The trust portfolio in Gaza, which is about $1 billion, there are financial precautions here, and we expect that this problem in Gaza will end so that we can understand the situation on the ground, so that most of the operating organizations in Gaza, whether it be industrial, financial, or others, can take into account. But even this, there is financial hedging for the expected losses. And there will be other hedging for years on. Do not wait, or we do not expect that the banks will play a major role in the next 2 years in Gaza, because in the next 2 years will be to cover up for the losses and all the things that you heard in the previous sessions. Therefore, we must see that the 13 banks operating in Palestine will focus their work and resources based on their activity in the West Bank. And this needs management, systematic management, to be able to accumulate deposits for development in Palestine in general, in the West Bank, and to confront the obligations that banks will face in the Gaza Strip in order to contribute to rebuilding the economy of the Gaza Strip in the next phase. So this is my comment. Now I will invite Mr. Habib Al-Hen, who is a doctoral student in England, and he's a teacher in England. Mr. Habib Al-Hen speaks Arabic. Mr. Hen, good afternoon, and the floor is yours. Good afternoon, Mr. Mahel, and thank you for this. Do you want me to speak Arabic or English? It is a comprehensive introduction that will make me summarize my paper further in order to save on time. The banking sector, all the technical indicator, pressure tests, and the statements issued by the Palestinian Monetary Authority is a solid sector that applies all international standards and even bypasses in its compliance. What I will mention today is not the status of the banking sector, but its ability to face the pressure it is currently facing, and to think of other risks related to the situation that we are living now, which is the political situation that we're going through. First of all, there are two important points that the paper focuses on. First, everything that we have seen, including the threats that the financial or the banking sector faced since the beginning of the war, is an ongoing systematic policy that existed before. Here we're speaking of the surplus of shekel. It is a problem that has existed since the Palestinian Monetary Authority was created, and it's been more visible since 2017 due to the different Israeli legislation applied to the area and to the sector. Also, there are threats that we've seen in previous year by the Israeli radical minister Smotrich are a continuation of a problem that existed before about the exemptions that were given per year, but there was a threat to use them to threaten the banking sector and the P&A in general. These issues are part of the problems that continued, and we can say that it became a bigger problem in the West Bank, but in the Gaza Strip, and this brings us to the second point that the paper is trying to say, is that there's a difference between the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and this difference is increasing, the gap is increasing, and the war led to two different tracks between the West Bank and Gaza. The West Bank has the problem speaking, there's a surplus of shekel in the banks, but in Gaza there is lack of cash. People cannot access their deposits in banks, and there is no ATM functioning in Gaza. We've seen many news reporting the injuries during the lines on ATMs, but now there are no ATMs in Gaza. Everything is destroyed, nothing remained. People cannot have access to their money. The PMA tried to intervene, but we've seen that it established an online payment system in Gaza. It was important, but we come back to an important question since there's a disruption of water, intermittent electricity, and there's a problem of telecommunication. To what extent can this e-payment system remain functional in Gaza with this intermittent electricity and internet? We speak, the PMA said we used to cover the entire credit portfolio in Gaza. We speak of about $1 billion in credit. So if we look at recent data from the Palestinian Monetary Authority for the banks operating in Palestine, we noticed that between September, that is 6 months after the war, with the provisions and losses in bank amounted to about $408 million. These problems in the Gaza Strip and the difficult access to cash led to exploitation by traders and money exchangers of the people to have access to their money. So probably the priority now in Gaza, or any intervention that can help the people have access to their cash, because money is accumulating in banks, but they're not able to access it. But in the West Bank, there's the problem of the shekel surplus and the threats raised of seizing all banking relations, and which has been solved a few days ago, and these relations have been extended for a year, and we try to the best extent possible to propose solutions and other interventions so that this threat does not keep coming back. There is another problem in the West Bank, which appeared in the past period in the banking sector, which is the difficulty of bringing cash from Jordan, especially with the problems on the bridge between Jordan and Palestine. And this led to some fluctuation of the exchange rate and difference between the local market and international market. Some people abused the situation. The PMA intervened quickly and issued regulations in this regard to put an end to this phenomenon. The important thing to say here, and Mr. Mahel said that, the banking sector is not only a sector that in the future will depend on the economic activity in the West Bank, but it has focused 90% of its activity in the West Bank. And we said that Gaza had about 50 branches of banks, but in Gaza there are 328 branches and 624 ATMs. The West Bank has the lion's share of the deposits of customers and the credit facilities. What we saw in terms of banking data since the beginning of the war, it's worth mentioning that the profits of banks since the beginning of the war, according to data available, that is the first 9 months of the war, the profits dropped by 55%. Bad debts increased by 17%. Credit to households and individuals almost stopped. In the same time, there was a rise of deposits from the Gaza Strip for several reasons. The main reason is that people are afraid of carrying cash, so it is transferred because they are displaced several times, so they prefer to deposit their money. So people receive salaries and aid, but they cannot withdraw this money because of the destroyed banking infrastructure, and this led to an increase in the deposits from the Gaza Strip by 78.8% during the war. It's $1.3 billion. On the other hand, deposits in the West Bank stagnated almost, and this increase in deposits was confronted with increased reliance of the PA on the banking sector because of its financial crisis and piracy of the clearing funds, and the problem of a drop in international aid that has been ongoing for years. During this period, since the beginning of the war, loans by the PA and its institutions increased by 33.3%, and we've heard of the accumulated credit facilities achieved by the PNA. So the total loans from the banking sector to the public sector, according to recent data of September 2024, represented about 22.5% of the credit facilities. We can see this clearly in this diagram. Since the beginning of the war to date, what is happening is that the share of Gaza Strip of deposits in the Palestinian banking sector is increasing, while its share of credit facilities preserved the same level. There was a minimum rise in the past few months, but I don't have sufficient information on the reason behind this increase in the Gaza Strip. And this brings us to the issues of critical importance in the banking sector, and it needs deep consideration at the local and international level. First, the ongoing problem of NIS surplus, and it's a problem. And without speaking of the cost endured by the banks, you speak of old bank. An old paper said that this problem reduces the profits of banks by about 20%, which is the surplus of shekel. The other problem, the correspondent bank system and the reliance on the Israeli banking system. And we need to solve this problem radically so that we don't remain under the mercy of the guarantees and facilities granted by the Israeli banks. And another problem, a key problem, which is the shortage of cash in the Gaza Strip, and the interventions related to digital payment are important. They reduce the crisis, but the solution is for sure to allow cash to enter into Gaza and to help people access their funds. There's also the problem of lending and the bank's exposure. Today, we're not speaking only of 22.5%, which are direct loans to the Palestinian Authority, but there are public servants. They have loans from banks, and the World Bank addresses this issue. It says that the total loans represent about 40% of the credit facilities provided by the Palestinian banking sector. They are dependent on the Palestinian Authority. Without speaking of the arrears to the private sector and how the private sector can deal with any shortages of cash. Without speaking, what's clear here is there are no other solutions. The only solution under this crisis, and the most important part of the paper now, these problems are known, But now we come to the unheeded problems. As I was writing the paper, I looked at Palestine newspaper from 1945. And this is this extract which speaks of the Arab Nation Bank Limited. It was a great bank. It had 10% of capital in profit. It was an encouraging piece of news if someone wanted to invest in the banking sector. Bank Al Ummah, or the Nation Bank, like other banks that emerged in Palestine before the Nakba, because there were colonial banks and national banks in Palestine. It was liquidated and its deposits were transferred to the banks we know today under Israeli names. What attracts our attention here is that we are living a similar situation to the Nakba in terms of displacement, destruction, killing, and this requires that we read our history and see what happened during the Nakba, what happened to the funds of the people at the time. There are several studies that may show this, and we're speaking of Nakba or displacement, how the Palestinian people lost their land, but the Israelis not only confiscated the Palestinian land, but they also froze the accounts of the Palestinians in banks. They laid hand on these accounts as well. And this brings us to the question, since we hear threats by different Israeli politicians every day, and their different plans to divide us into cantons and control our lives. So the question is, what will happen to the Palestinian banking system if this Israeli political ambition is realized? There are Palestinian organizations to guarantee the rights of customers, like the Deposit Guarantee Institution, but they cannot deal with a full collapse of the system. So we cannot deny that this threat exists, but how ready are we to deal with such threats? And can history repeat itself? And if history repeats itself, how can we protect the rights of the people? In conclusion, the paper provided a way of this pessimistic vision. I presented a number of recommendations, including some pragmatic recommendations to continue the PMA efforts regarding the shekel surplus and the correspondent banks, and to try to find solutions to the problem of cash shortages in Gaza, focus on e-payment, but at the same time, even if people in Gaza have access to their funds, you must remember the inflation in Gaza and the lack of resources. People cannot buy their needs at normal prices. So if you solve the problem of access to funds, will not be the only solution to help solving the crisis. The direct solution is the unconditional flow of humanitarian assistance if we want to solve the problem. If we come to other points, the key problem, which needs all this effort, is to focus on the sovereignty of the Palestinian financial system, which is a problem that we face in the Palestinian economy in general. This dependency on the Israeli economy is a key problem, and it must be solved. I believe I used all my time. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Habib. When you read the paper, it is a good summary of the current situation and the future vision on how to deal with the next phase. Thank you, Mr. Habib. Professor Heiner Plasbeck.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this important conference, and thank you for the speaker on this full-fledged description of the problems actually in Palestine around the banking system. I want to make things a bit more, I would like to structure things a bit more along a certain line, namely that we have two problems in financial system in general and with money in general. We have one as the static, so to say, the statics of the banking system that was described by the chairman and was described by my colleague, that is shaken in Palestine at this moment. So even the standard banking is endangered by many political arrangements, by the threat from Israel and so on. So this is the one thing that is extremely important to keep the guarantee the stability of the banking system as such. This is an issue that is absolutely political, and Palestine here needs definitely the help of the international community. And well, one positive point was, in my opinion, very clearly the strong G7 statement on the threat from the Israeli finance minister to cut the ties between the banking systems. So that the G7 issued such a statement means, in my opinion, very much. It means that there is a chance at least to get some guarantees, international guarantees for the banking system. But that is one point. That is the static, so to say, the static part of the banking system. The other part is the dynamic part, the part going into the future. What is the aim for a future financial and monetary system in Palestine? And here we have to go a bit further. My colleague mentioned that to support productive investment is really important. Yeah, that is the crucial thing. Support productive investment everywhere. In agriculture, we have heard about agriculture. There we have huge potentials for productivity increase. But what you need in the end, if we look a bit into the future, if there is a chance for more sovereignty of the Palestinian people, then you need a strong system to support the productive sector, to increase productivity, and with the increasing productivity, to stabilize the economy. But what does it mean? This is not trivial. The question is, what does it mean? What do you have to do? And here, I think preparations are necessary at a very early stage. Even now, in the midst of war, it is necessary to think about the preparations that are needed to install such a dynamic monetary system, a system that can provide for really monetary conditions that are really helping the real economy and helping to increase productivity. So the point is that I want to make is that I think we all agree that in the end, what you need to be successful here is you need your own currency. You need a monetary system that is in your hands and not something that is imposed on you from the outside. This is the crucial thing. You may say this is the long term, the far future, but I'm not sure whether it's not necessary to think about it right now. So what do we need? What do we know about monetary conditions in the developing world, and what can we learn? What can we learn from this experience? The point is that monetary conditions have two parts. One is the interest rate, and the other one is the exchange rate. What you need, and I could give you examples, but China is the most outstanding example. What you need to be successful in development is a stable exchange rate, a real stable real exchange rate, which means stable competitiveness vis-a-vis the outside world, rather stable as possible. And you need low and stable interest rates. Low and stable is the crucial question. And here comes the point for Palestine. Palestine is in a very difficult situation from the outset, because you need to improve your productivity, to increase your growth rates steadily and sustainably for a long term. You need good monetary conditions, as I said, and that means you need your own monetary policy. But the point is, you cannot have your own monetary policy without being productive. And that is really a critical situation. That is what you call sometimes a catch-22. You are in a catch-22 situation, which means if one condition is not taken away, you will never get the other one. Well, a famous example is workers looking for jobs are asked to have work experience. Well, but if they don't have work experience, they have no chance to ever get a job, because a job, the people asking for work experience if you want a job. So this is the catch-22 situation, and this applies really to Israel, to Palestine, because if you want to get rid of the Israeli domination on the monetary side, then you have to get into the process. I'm very careful and cautious to get into the process of designing a way towards your own national currency. And this way can only be opened due to this catch-22 situation. It can only be opened by external assistance. What you need is, so to say, a big brother. You need a big brother that would help you to introduce the currency, and more importantly, not only to introduce the currency, but to stabilize the currency. The biggest single problem that developing countries on the monetary side have today in the world is to stabilize their exchange rates. If you are subject to international speculation and all the hot money flowing around the world, then you have no chance as a small country to reasonably survive. That is why so many countries have fixed the exchange rate vis-a-vis others unilaterally. Others have dollarized their economies. That's all not a solution. The only reasonable solution is that with the help, so, as I said, of a big brother, you get some stabilization of the exchange rate, and not only of the nominal exchange rate, but I mentioned it before, of the real exchange rate, which means if a country like Palestine would have an inflation rate of 10%, and the big brother, let's say it's Europe, Europe would have 2%. You need an orderly depreciation of 8% every year, so that the real exchange rate remains exactly the same. And it is not subject to international speculation. So it is, in my opinion, extremely urgent to think about any negotiations in the future. We do not know how long it will take. It will take a couple of months or even a year or two before negotiations start on a new agreement concerning the status of Palestine and Israel, under whichever circumstance it is. But Palestine has to insist that the ongoing unstable banking and money situation cannot persist. It was agreed upon in the Paris Agreement a time ago, but it cannot go on forever. It has to come to an end. And if this is replaced by something, then it must be a way towards a national currency in Palestine, which asks for a transformative period of, say, 5 to 10 years for the support of a big international player who would do the job. My last word: this would cost, for example, if Europe would do it, if Europe would give such a guarantee of stabilizing the real exchange rate for Palestine, would cost Europe nothing. It's not a question of money or so. It's just a question of understanding the logic of the dynamics that are unfolding, have to unfold in Palestine, and giving the monetary conditions for that to be achieved. If Europe would promise such a stable real exchange rate, the markets would immediately believe it, and nobody would test this promise, so that intervention would not even be necessary. Thank you.
if the presenter is not available. A question to Dr. Al-Hen. Doctor, in your opinion, do you believe that we can have a lending bank for agricultural sector? And do you think that the banks can support the agriculture? Could it be part of their social responsibility to support the agricultural sector instead of waiting until we get support from abroad? As for Dr. Lasbeck from London, I believe that there should be a pressure from the people to their governments, for their governments to pressure Israel to allow access of food, water, electricity, doctors, medicine, all types of relief. Gaza needs all types of support. This is unprecedented in history. This is collective genocide to these science. Everything in Gaza is being annihilated. They're killing even the donkeys, the cats and dogs, everything. There's no mercy. They have no mercy towards people or even stones. In terms of the status of banks in Palestine, it's excellent, not just good. Considering we have $16 billion in terms of deposits. It has not reduced. Many of the deposits are transfers from Palestinians, expats in the Gulf and the United States. The banking sector is excellent as long as we do not put any restrictions on internal and external transactions. Just about a month or 2 months ago, there were problems. Some people tried to withdraw some Jordanian dinars or dollars. Then the monetary authority has issued, so you're allowed to withdraw whatever currency you want. This almost created a problem because everyone was suspecting that the banks are going to add fees to withdrawing dollars and dinars. According to my evaluation, I have all the final accounts for all the banks, and I'm well aware that their situation is quite excellent. As for their surplus and shekel, the monetary authority can solve the problem. Their instructions is that, or their policy is that we should not have. So the monetary authority can increase the percentage they have for the surplus of each currency. So the shekel surplus should not continue to be a threat. And then at the end, I would like to conclude by narrating a story. In 2004, the Israeli Zionist military had an incursion to Ramallah Tahta on the old city, and they put a gun towards the head, open the treasury. I want to access X person's account. I was at the IMF. The IMF said that this is a crisis. They thought that all the Palestinians are going to rush to their banks to withdraw their money. And the result was totally the opposite. Through clarifications made, no, the bank is taking responsibility and the bank is going to return the money confiscated. When the banks stated that no one has withdrawn their money, and even the IMF said, give me your comments. I said, as long as the bank has issued a statement that they are responsible for any money confiscated. If a soldier confiscates any money, then we're going to reimburse you. Then that's it. Then the banks should reassure people that everything's okay. The monetary authority should not add any limitations. As you well know, in Lebanon, everyone is well aware of the financial situation in Lebanon, so it doesn't be a replica of it. Thank you. Mr. Habib, we're almost done. Two questions. I
لا بسيطة.
No problem.
أنا بدي أكمل من حيث ما انتهى الدكتور
I would
نضال.
like to add on to what Dr. Nidal has mentioned. The banks should be
بدأ فعلا المواطن في فترة من الفترات
at a point, a certain citizens started feeling worried because there was restrictions to how to access their money in terms of withdrawing their cash. So since you're a lawyer, how can you reassure the people as well as the media that the deposits are safe? On the other hand, what's troublesome is the corresponding banking. The corresponding banks. Have we found a way to find an alternative to these banks, to Israeli banks, corresponding banks? If now there's an extension for a year with Israeli banks, do you think we can overcome that? Mr. Habib, I believe he asked you a question. Mr. Saad had a question.
يعني إحدى توصيات الدراسة موجودة إنه نشجع
One of the recommendation is that
يعني البانك اوفرينج بمعنى إنه التركيز حاليا
we encourage the bank offering, diversifying the bank offering, such as Islamic banks and others. However, we need to have specialized banks and social banks. Those are terms that are well known worldwide. They are specialized banking, not only specialized banking such as agricultural lending, and not only do they provide funding, but they also provide services. So they would definitely help the companies and individuals who want to work in that sector. And that could be replicated, and there's several lessons learned worldwide. As for the role of the international community, we have reiterated that this is not on the shoulders of the Palestinian National Authority, because the international community's pressure is what allowed the extension for Israeli corresponding banks for another year. So anything that we need would definitely need to have international community support in order for us to arrive at a solution. As for the comments made by Dr. Nidal, I'm not sure if the monetary authority has the solution at hand. They put their liquidity percentage, and then they would be able to calculate the surplus. But we have to take into consideration that having a surplus of shekel in the banking sector would create a high risk for banks, and this high risks and instability, in order to understand the exchange rates, also would affect and impact the operational capacity of banks and the losses that they could incur. So I believe this is something that would need in-depth solutions.
One of the comments or questions from outside was, why do banks do not accept old currency in Gaza? ليه ما عم تقبل البنوك عملة قديمة في غزة، يعني كاش ماني؟ حقيقة البنوك الآن كل
To be honest, all banks in Gaza are closed, and all the cash has been already dispersed to people. Our people in Gaza, we had made sure that all the banks have given out all the cash that they have, whether it's old or new bills, were already distributed to the people. Or so there are now there's no cash in banks in Gaza, and the banks are closed. So in the center in Deir el-Balah, there is some transactions in terms of transfers, money transfers. And also, you probably heard about this. Mr. Al-Hin has mentioned the instant payment program and Al-Buraq, which are electronic programs for money transfers and the payments made via cards and the payments by phone. That's ongoing. However, in terms of cash, they do not have any. Someone has also asked a question, but I didn't understand the question well. Are the loans given by the Palestinian Authority? I didn't understand the question. If he means that the Palestinian Monetary Authority has pressured the banks to give loans to the governments, I'm not sure if that's what he meant with the question, but we all deal with this as one team. It's true that the banks are private sector and they have their own problems, and the government has its own demands, and of course the monetary authority has is part of this whole system that's suffering and trying to solve the problems at hand. But we can say that now we're trying to solve this collectively. We're trying to carry the burden collectively as much as possible. And the situation has become hard for all the banks because, on one hand, in terms of funds and the capacity to lend is decreasing. However, we're still working together at a high level of responsibility and patriotism. And here I would like to answer two questions. In terms of, there's no doubt that people here have faced a lot. About a month ago, there was a lack of response from some banks to disperse US dollars or foreign currencies. Now we're not talking about politics, we're talking about economy. What happened at the time, and this is something we should link it together all together in order for us to understand the whole picture. You've all talked about Israel. Israel has not renewed the statement, the assurance statement or guarantee statements to Israeli banks to work with us. And they left that until the last moment before the deadline arrived, just moments before the deadline, just one day or the same day that the agreement expires. What does this happen? What does this do? Our traders and our dears who actually working in this sector, they were really worried that the banks might stop their cooperation. So what they did, they started letting go of the shekel that they have and trying to disperse it because they're thinking that this shekel is going to be accepted by Israel after the period. So they started trading shekel to US dollars or Jordanian dinars. So therefore, there was a severe shortage with all banks in the currencies, and that this was done by, unfortunately, by the exchangers, the money exchangers. There was a discussion between the monetary authority and the exchangers to stop doing so. And honestly, this has reduced the problem greatly. Then they came up with 200 shekels. No one wants to deal with the 200 shekels, so people started dropping the 200 shekels they have just to get rid of it. And all of you are responsible and come from well-known backgrounds. There's exploitation in terms of transferring from shekel to US dollars by some people, and many have benefited from that. But that phase is almost over, so we almost got over that. As for the reassurances, of course, the bank's situation is still upholding themselves financially. And you also have to understand one more thing. There's no alternative to dealing with Israel currently in terms of commerce, except having Israeli banks. However, if this relation is cut off between us and Israel, if we suspend this relationship, then definitely our commerce with Israel and trade with Israel is going to be impacted, and various industries are going to be impacted, especially those that are exporting to us, but we're going to be affected more than that. But this does not mean that there would be a full that Palestine would be suspended from all trade worldwide. No one could do that. You cannot think that if our relationship with Israel is ceased, then we have to sit there and weep. No, not at all. If we have a problem with Israel, then definitely it's going to create a problem, but our relations with the rest of the world is going to continue. There are Palestinian banks that do not have a corresponding bank in Israel at all. So even if this relationship is suspended, they don't have a problem. However, our commerce with Israel, trade with Israel is affected, and the banks are the tool that works on this trade. So therefore, just to let you know, we have requested as an association of banks, we requested that that MAS conducts a study for us on the tools or mechanisms available for us to use to reduce the impact and alleviate the impact of this if it ever occurs, which is I'm referring to the suspension of dealing with the Israeli banks, in order for us to alleviate the impact, because there's no way that we would find an alternative that would fully protect the country if we suspend any corresponding banks between us and Israel. So it would definitely be impacted, but we want to alleviate the impact. And as many have mentioned, there's international pressure, which is led by the United States, and it's always ongoing in order